The city of Maplewood had always been a place where things felt like they were either bustling with energy or simmering with tension. Police officers worked long shifts, and the community was closely watching every move they made. In recent years, things had gotten worse. People were speaking out against police brutality, accusing officers of unfair treatment, and demanding change. The police department was under constant scrutiny. Serena Hill, a highly skilled and ambitious black woman, had just been appointed as the new head of Internal Affairs IA. The IA division was crucial. It was responsible for investigating complaints about police officers' misconduct. But in a department like Maplewood's, that wasn't an easy job. The department had always been resistant to change, especially when it came to holding officers accountable for their actions. Officers feared that making waves would get them ostracized or even kicked out. Serena knew what she was walking into. The department had always been seen as a brotherhood, and anyone who threatened that was seen as an outsider. She wasn't just a newcomer, she was also a black woman. Many of her colleagues already looked at her with suspicion, unsure of whether she could truly understand the struggles of the department, or the challenges they faced on the streets. Her job was to investigate officers, including ones with years of experience, some who had been there long before she was even a cadet. It was going to be tough, but Serena was determined. She believed in fairness, in justice, and in making things right. One officer who stood out to her from the start was Carl Jennings. Carl had been with the department for nearly 2 decades. He was a tough, no-nonsense cop, known for his quick temper and his tendency to use excessive force. Many in the department viewed him as a hero, a man who got the job done. But there were whispers, complaints from the community about his behavior, rumors of racial profiling, and allegations of violence against suspects who didn't deserve it. Serena had been warned about him. Some of her colleagues didn't think he could be touched, claiming that his reputation was too strong for anyone to challenge. Serena's first priority was to ensure that no one was above the law, especially someone like Carl Jennings. But she understood the delicate balance she had to maintain. If she went after him too quickly, it could destroy any chance of getting her colleagues on her side. And she needed their support. She would need to tread carefully, building trust, and proving she could do the job fairly, without bias. Serena's first day on the job was a whirlwind. As she walked into the Internal Affairs office, she could feel the eyes of her colleagues on her. It wasn't just the usual curiosity, there was something colder about it. She could tell that many of them didn't think she belonged in this position, especially in a department like theirs. As she settled into her new role, Serena took a deep breath. She wasn't new to policing, she had worked in the department for years before moving up to IA. But she had always been part of the field operations, where things were different. She wasn't used to being the one in charge of holding her fellow officers accountable. And she knew that, with the job came intense scrutiny. It wasn't long before she was introduced to Officer Carl Jennings. He was standing by the coffee machine, his towering figure making the already cramped room feel even smaller. He had a reputation for being tough, and his reputation preceded him. Jennings looked Serena up and down, sizing her up before even saying a word. "So you're the new IA head," Carl said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "How do you expect to handle this place? You might want to take a seat and learn from the people who've been doing this for years." Serena wasn't surprised by his tone. She had heard about Carl's history and his views on anyone who wasn't one of the boys. He was known for dismissing anyone who challenged the old-school way of policing, and he didn't hide his disdain for authority figures who didn't fit the traditional mold. What did surprise her, however, was his assumption that she would just bow down to his experience. "I'm here to do my job, Carl," Serena replied calmly. "I'm here to make sure that everyone, no matter who they are, follows the law and serves the community fairly. If you have a problem with that, you're welcome to take it up with me." Carl's smirk faltered for just a moment, but he quickly recovered. "We'll see how long that attitude lasts when you actually deal with the streets," he said, his eyes narrowing. "You can't fix this department from an office, not with the way things really work." Serena stood her ground. "I'm not here to fix the department, Carl. I'm here to hold it accountable. She let her words hang in the air for a moment before turning to walk away, leaving Carl staring after her, clearly unsettled. From that moment on, Serena knew her relationship with Carl would be complicated. He was used to being in control, used to doing things his way. He didn't take kindly to someone like Serena challenging his authority or questioning his methods. But Serena wasn't intimidated. She had been underestimated her whole life, and she wasn't about to let anyone, especially Carl Jennings, change that. As the day wore on, Serena's determination only grew. She knew the department would resist her efforts to clean up its act, but she was ready to fight. She wasn't just fighting for her own career, she was fighting for the integrity of the entire force. The city needed change, and Serena Hill was going to lead it. Serena sat in her office, sifting through a stack of complaints about Officer Carl Jennings. The first few were from community members, detailing accounts of racial profiling and excessive force during arrests. One complaint described how Jennings had pulled over a black man for a minor traffic violation and treated him aggressively, forcing him to the ground and using a taser. Another report claimed that Jennings had ignored a woman's cries for help when she was being harassed by a group of men, choosing instead to arrest her for a petty offense. Serena couldn't ignore the pattern. There were too many similar accusations for it to be a coincidence. But as much as the reports disturbed her, Serena also knew what kind of trouble this investigation could stir up. Jennings was a senior officer with a reputation for getting results. The department relied on him for high-pressure situations and respected him for his tough approach. He had the backing of several key people, which made him nearly untouchable in the eyes of many. Yet Serena couldn't allow that to stop her. If these accusations were true, it was her duty to investigate. She started digging deeper. Serena spent days reviewing past complaints against Jennings, pulling records, and even speaking with his former partners. Some officers in the department were hesitant to speak up. They feared retaliation or being labeled as troublemakers. But eventually, a few trusted officers came forward with stories of their own. They described times when they had witnessed Jennings using inappropriate force, speaking disrespectfully to people of color, and turning a blind eye to misconduct by fellow officers. However, with each new piece of evidence, Serena felt a growing weight on her shoulders. She knew the risks. Jennings was a respected figure in the department. Going after him could alienate her from her colleagues, many of whom had worked with him for years. She was already facing resistance from a few IA staff members, who didn't seem eager to get involved in an investigation against such a well-liked officer. There were murmurs among the team about how this might damage the department's reputation. Serena couldn't ignore the voices urging caution. They told her to back off, that making an enemy of Carl Jennings could ruin her career. But as the investigation grew more serious, she became more determined to uncover the truth. If she let Jennings off the hook now, it would mean that the system had failed, again. One night, Serena received a tip. An anonymous source claimed to have a recording that could blow the case wide open. It was a video of Jennings in a heated argument at a bar. According to the source, Jennings had used racial slurs during the altercation. Serena's heart raced. If the video was authentic, it would be the smoking gun she needed. But there was a huge risk. Releasing the recording could fracture the department. Jennings had powerful friends who would do anything to protect him. After careful consideration, Serena decided to track down the source. She couldn't let fear stop her from doing what was right. The next day, she met with the anonymous person who handed over the video, warning her that this was a dangerous move. Serena thanked the person and promised to use it carefully. She now had undeniable proof of Jennings' behavior, but it was still up to her to decide how to handle it. Serena stood outside Carl Jennings' office, her heart pounding in her chest. She had the evidence, an audio recording of Jennings using racial slurs during an off-duty fight, and she was about to confront him with it. She'd thought about this moment for days, and now it was time. She needed to remain calm and composed, even though she knew Jennings would be furious when she revealed what she had found. She knocked on his door, and Jennings waved her in without looking up from his desk. He had no idea what was coming. Serena, what can I do for you? Jennings asked, his tone dismissive, as usual. I need to talk to you, Carl, Serena replied firmly. She wasn't here for small talk. She had a job to do. Jennings raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Serena took a deep breath and pressed play on the audio recording. The voices of Carl Jennings and a man arguing loudly filled the room. The recording was clear, and the racial slurs that Jennings used were unmistakable. Jennings' face went pale as he heard his own voice coming through the speakers. He looked at Serena with wide eyes, disbelief written across his face. Where did you get that? He demanded, standing up and slamming his hand on the desk. This is nothing but a setup. You can't just take someone's personal life and use it against them like that. Serena remained calm. It's not about your personal life, Carl. It's about your actions, and the fact that they've been harmful to the community and your fellow officers. You've been accused of using excessive force, racial profiling, and now this. Your behavior is unacceptable. Jennings tried to stay in control, but Serena could see the cracks starting to show. His usual bravado was gone, replaced by a defensive anger. You're overreacting, he said, his voice rising. I've been in this job for years, and now you're trying to destroy my career because you've got some personal vendetta. You're just a rookie in this department. What do you know about real policing? I know that no one is above the law, Carl, Serena replied, her voice steady. Not even you. This investigation wasn't personal. It's about holding people accountable. It's about protecting the community. Your actions have consequences. Jennings clenched his fists, his face flushed with anger. This department needs officers like me. The community needs officers like me, he growled. If you think you can come in here and bring me down, you're dead wrong. The department will back me up. They'll see this for what it is, just an attempt to attack the department's reputation. Serena's expression remained unchanged. We'll see, Carl. I'm not doing this for you, or for anyone else. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. And no matter how many people try to protect you, the truth will come out. Carl Jennings stared at her, his defiance not quite as strong as before. He had underestimated Serena, but now he realized that she wasn't backing down. She had the evidence, and she wasn't afraid to use it. With a final, simmering glare, Jennings stormed out of the room, leaving Serena standing alone. She felt the weight of the moment. The investigation was now out in the open. But the battle was far from over. After her tense confrontation with Carl Jennings, Serena knew it was time to take the next big step. She could no longer keep the evidence to herself, hoping the department would act on it. The corruption ran too deep, and Jennings' influence was too strong. Serena made the difficult decision to bring the case to the city's Civilian Review Board, a group of independent citizens who held the police accountable. By going public, she knew the investigation would be out of her hands, but she had no choice. This wasn't just about her career or her standing in the department. It was about doing what was right. The moment she submitted the evidence, including the damaging video of Jennings using racial slurs, it went viral. News outlets picked up the story, and soon, social media was buzzing with anger and disbelief. The video spread like wildfire, Jennings' voice, unmistakable, using hateful language that shocked even those who had stood by him. Along with the video, stories from the community and witness testimonies painted a clear picture of a man who had abused his power for years. The city erupted in outrage. People were demanding justice. It wasn't just the minority communities that were speaking out. Everyone, regardless of race, could see how dangerous and unfair this was. The public had seen enough. As the video and reports spread, the department was thrown into turmoil. Protesters gathered outside the police station, demanding that Jennings be fired immediately. People carried signs that read, "Hold officers accountable," and "No more tolerance for racism." For the first time in a long while, the department found itself on the defensive. The once untouchable Jennings was now at the center of a scandal, and the department was under a microscope. Serena watched as the police chief and other department leaders scrambled to maintain control. They were caught between protecting their own, including Jennings, and the growing public outcry. As more officers within the department quietly began speaking out, it became clear that Jennings' behavior wasn't an isolated incident. Other officers admitted they had seen him treat people unfairly, but out of fear of retaliation, they had remained silent. Now, with the growing pressure, some of them began to come forward. They could no longer justify ignoring his actions. The pressure from the public and from within the department mounted quickly. The police chief was forced to put Jennings on administrative leave while an official investigation took place. But the damage was done. Jennings' career was in jeopardy, and the department was now faced with a choice: cover up the truth or face the consequences. As more voices joined the calls for accountability, it became clear that the old ways of protecting corrupt officers would no longer work. Serena's decision to bring the case to light had shaken the very foundation of the department. The truth, though painful, had set the stage for something far greater than just the downfall of one officer. Her investigation led to major reform within the police department, a shift that many believed was long overdue. As the city continued to demand justice, the police department had no choice but to act. After a thorough investigation, Carl Jennings was officially fired from the department. The charges against him were not just internal violations, but criminal ones: racial discrimination, excessive force, and misconduct. The community cheered the decision, but the work wasn't over. The city began to hold the department accountable for its failure to act sooner. Public pressure led to a review of police practices, with a focus on addressing systemic issues like racial bias, excessive force, and transparency. For the first time in a long while, citizens felt like they had been heard. Serena had given them hope that change was possible. For Serena, the victory was bittersweet. She had done what was necessary, but the fight for justice was far from over. While she was proud of the reforms, she knew the path forward would be filled with challenges. She had seen firsthand how entrenched the resistance to change was in the department, but she was determined to continue pushing for accountability, not just for Jennings but for every officer who abused their power. Serena became a symbol of strength and determination in the community. People who had once doubted her now praised her leadership and courage. Even officers within the department, some of whom had initially resisted her investigation, began to respect her. They recognized that Serena wasn't just someone who followed orders, she was someone who did what was right, even when it was hard. She wasn't afraid to challenge the system, and that made her an example for others to follow. As the department began its reforms, Serena's work didn't stop there. She continued to push for greater transparency and community involvement in policing. She worked tirelessly to rebuild trust between the department and the citizens it served. Serena had proven herself as a leader, not just within the department, but in the larger fight for justice and reform. In quiet moments, Serena reflected on how far she had come, both professionally and personally. She remembered the doubts she had faced when she first walked into the department, and the constant battles to be taken seriously. But now, as she stood in front of a new era of policing, she realized that she had helped change the course of history for the department. She had shown that one person, even when the odds are stacked against them, can make a real difference. Serena knew the fight for justice was far from over, but she was ready. She had proven that true leadership was about standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult. And as she looked ahead, she vowed to continue the work she had started, to be the change she had always wanted to see in the world, and to never stop fighting for justice.